Well, Frank Glenn's not here this morning. He's out harvesting, it being fall time. I'm kind of glad he's not here because I was going to mention him. I was talking with him last month and he was moaning about the weather, as farmers are prone to do. He said, we need rain. He said, do you have any pull with the Lord? I said, well, I don't really know. How come you're asking? And he said, well, my beans need rain, and a real preacher would get me some rain. So to save Frank's beans and my reputation, I planned a 2-day vacation at our farm, knowing, despite what meteorologists say, that rain is not caused by the confluence of certain atmospheric weather patterns, but is the result of my going on vacation. And so I went. I took my friend Jim with me, and sure enough, when we arrived at the farm, it just began dumping rain, cats and dogs, and since I couldn't do anything outside, I went out to the garage to change the oil in the riding mower and sharpen the blades. And it had been a while since I had had those blades off and they were stuck. And so I had to use a long piece of pipe slipped over the end of the wrench to give me more leverage. It was the Greek philosopher Archimedes, who said, give me a firm place to stand and a lever, and I can move the earth. Archimedes said that while taking the blades off his lawnmower. So there I was, pulling that pipe with all my might, and the socket slipped off the nut, and my knuckles hit the mower deck. And oh, did that hurt. It hurt so bad, tears came to my eyes, and I began saying certain words out loud. And Jim heard me, and he came outside, and he saw me laying there on the cement floor, and he said, what in the world happened to you? Are you crying? Why are you crying? I said, I'm crying because I'm so happy for Frank and his beans. Look at all this rain. And it just settled into this beautiful, gorgeous, nice, steady rain, a farmer's rain. So after working on the mower, I went inside and I took a nap on the front porch, just listening to the rain. Jim walked by. He said, were you just going to lay around all day or what? And I reminded him of the Bible story about God working in his garage and being worn down to a frazzle, so taking the day off. Even God took naps. I said, Genesis 2, verse 2, it's right there. You can read all about it. You remember that story, don't you? How God worked 6 straight days building the universe. Then on the morning of the 7th day, God needed to mow. Now, I know it doesn't say this in our English language Bibles, but in the original Hebrew it says this, and Mark's nodding his head in agreement. Yeah. So God wakes up on the 7th morning to mow the grass God had created on the 3rd day. So was working on his mower, busted his knuckles, and said, that's it, I'm taking a nap. Today I rest. I enjoy life. God named that nap Sabbath, which comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means to cease and desist. So God took a nap. And some years later, when God met with Moses on Mount Sinai to impart these rules for life, God suggested, you know, it might be a good idea for you to do that also, and consequently made it the 4th commandment. Remember the Sabbath. Remember to nap. It's a holy thing. So we've been talking about those maps, both people and paper, that form and shape our lives, and how various characteristics on maps parallel our own lives. And what is one of the things you find on a map? The most glorious invention ever in road travel, the rest stop, which is what I want to talk about today, about stopping to rest. which God called the Sabbath, Shabbat, to cease and desist. Now, our ancestors thought the Sabbath was a day for sitting around quietly, miserable and somber. There was to be no laughter, no joy, no beauty on their Sabbath, just this unrelenting, gray, sober earnestness. But you should know that the early Hebrews had no objection to the Sabbath being a day of joy and fun. Indeed, that was the point. For 6 days they labored. And then came the day to savor, enjoy, and appreciate the beauty life had to offer. The naturalist John Muir was once asked if he enjoyed hiking. He bristled at the word. He said, "I don't like either the word or the thing. People ought to saunter in the mountains, not hike." Do you know the origin of the word saunter? It's a beautiful word. Way back in the Middle Ages, people used to go on pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and when people in the villages that they would pass through would yell out to them, asking them, "Where are you going?" they would reply, "A la Saunter," to the Holy Land. And so they became known as Saunterers or Saunterers. That's the origin of that word. Muir believed the mountains were America's holy land, that we should saunter through them reverently, not hike through them hurriedly. Consequently, he was usually the last person to reach camp at night because he never hurried. He stopped to get acquainted with individual trees along the way. And whenever someone would pass him on the trail, he would invite them to get down on their hands and knees to study the beauty of a microscopic flower or variety of moss. And usually he arrived at camp with flowers in his buttonholes and sprigs of fir branches in his hat. His life was lived in a spirit of Sabbath, not just one day a week, but every day. Now think how often you and I have been taught that Sabbath is a day to honor God, as if adoration and submission are something God requires of us. But what if the point of Sabbath is to acknowledge and honor our humanity? To immerse ourselves in the reservoirs of rest and creation, to learn again what it means to be human, what it means to be grateful. In that sense, the Sabbath is a day of rejuvenation, a pause that refreshes. That's what the Hebrews believed, and they took it very seriously and deeply. When Nehemiah discovered certain type A people were slipping into Jerusalem to make an extra buck on the Sabbath, he got himself put in charge, locked the city gate, and sent them home to take a nap. The Sabbath is the one day of the week we are asked to resist the urge to work. One day out of 7 that isn't about making a buck or expanding our wealth. One day when we're not hell-bent on getting ahead or rushing down the trail. It is a day for joy, for slowing down, for ceasing and desisting, so we can savor the beauty God has given us. And God said, let's call that day Sabbath. I remember one Sunday years ago, And incidentally, I don't know who put in the new garden in honor of Ken and Don Sheets, but it's out there to the left as you leave, and you can see it, and it's going to be beautiful. But I remember one day, years ago, when we were over in the White Meeting House, when Don Sheets stood during worship. It was the height of summer. All of her gardens were in bloom, and she invited everyone to come over to their house after meeting to see their flowers. That is Sabbath. Sabbath is dressing beautifully, eating delicious food, delighting our souls with gorgeous music. It is not sitting down at the computer to prepare for Monday's presentation. It is not dusting the house. Sabbath is avoiding fast food and enjoying with friends a slow meal. Sabbath is poetry. Instruction manuals are not Sabbath. Sabbath is curtains blowing in the breeze. Sabbath is pitch and catch in the side yard. An iPad is not Sabbath. Sabbath is a bicycle ride. Sabbath is kissing your spouse when the kids and grandkids are watching. It is not kissing someone else's spouse. Sabbath is a game of golf without keeping score. Sabbath is the hammock in our screen house. When rightly understood, the motives for Sabbath and Quaker simplicity are the same. They both are a corrective against our tendency to fill our lives with more and more and more. Both Sabbath and simplicity are our way of putting the brakes on our frantic rush to accumulate. It is our way of slowing down, of being called back to our center and source. We need this because we are an ironic people. We work overtime to buy things we don't need in order to impress people we don't like. We go on vacation to renew ourselves and come home spent and depleted. We begin a hobby to help us relax, and before long we've made it an obsession, a contest, a measure of our wealth and status. We sacrifice our relationships on the altar of money, convincing ourselves our families want the things we buy them more than the time we give them. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. How is that done? How is something made holy? By gratitude, by being grateful for life, by enjoying life, by doing something wonderful with our lives besides racking up more wealth, by stopping every now and then to lay down our levers and say, "This is the day the Lord hath made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." Henry Emerson Fosdick wrote the words to that song just before World War I. A war dreamed up by people bent on making the world a better place through military might. And we saw how that worked. The first two lines of the last hymn, though, remain with me, and I think are as fine a guide for our Christian life as any written. Save us from weak resignation to the evils we deplore. Years ago, after September 11th, the government said, if you see something, say something, urging us to be cognizant and aware of things that were happening around us. We need to transform that saying, friends. If you see something, say something. If you see people dehumanized and degraded, say something. If you see the poor abused and mistreated, say something. If you see someone rejected for their race or religion, say something. If, friends, you see anything that breaks the heart of God, you be the one to say something. And then we will be together the people who bring healing. That is our calling in this world. If anyone asks you what it means to be a Quaker, you just tell them, it means when I see something, I will say and do something. Amen. Turn and greet, friends. Thank you.